So I said in the last part of the lecture that I would immediately start about box sizing, but I just want to address something quickly. If I right click and click on inspect, I get this kind of view. It pops out somewhere on my screen at least. And you'll see, and I'll actually increase the size again so you can see what I'm doing here. You see that there's something called styles up here. And I get this this thing going because I selected this P class, right? Not this one. I clicked this P class, this element out here, because I inspected on it. And now I'm able to actually see this. I can see that this is the margin, this is the border, this is the padding, and this is the height and the width. So I actually get this whole thing. And this is the box model. I can get it visualized. Now let's get ahead and get into the next part here, which will be box sizing. So we are going to address that immediately. We have PowerPoint down here. And we have seen the box model in action. We are here at the box sizing. Now, everything you have to understand that CSS was created in 1994, so it's quite a bit ago, and we had different things were going for us at that point than today. I've been working with CSS since 1998, and so I haven't been there from the very start, but I've been there for quite some time. And not working with it, but at that point, I wrote a lot of CSS. And I don't know if any of you recall it, but there were things called Lunar Storm, and you know what? At that time, I was active, and they had both HTML and CSS, and that's why I found it interesting all of this. So let's get ahead and talk about box sizing content box and box sizing border box. You see, both of these images, they're showing the whole box model. But to the left, we see the only part that is highlighted in blue is the middle part. And to the right, you see more parts are giving a blue color. We can say that this is what we are actually going to focus on, the difference between these two. Because if I make no changes to CSS whatsoever, most elements work according to the rules that are found on the left here. Because their property is naturally and default on content box. But for most cases I have ever encountered, and most web developers ever encounter, we never use that anymore. We don't use content box. We change this to box sizing border box. And the reason is kind of simple. But first, we're going to discuss what it does. So you have the content to the left, and you have it to the right. But on the content to the left, this is what we are looking at. We're looking at content box. It says, when I'm typing in height and width, what I'm actually typing in the height and the width for, this is important, I'm typing the height and width for the content. And then, if I also add a padding, that padding get added on top of that height and width. So if I start with a height of 50 pixels, and then I add a padding on top of bottom of 10 pixels each. So 10 pixels above takes a 10 pixels below. Now the total height of this box would be 50 pixels plus 10, right? So I would have a 70 pixels height. And then if I go further and add border, like say 2 pixels on each side, I would have a 74 pixel height of this one. And then I add margin. And there's a distance above and a below, and the whole thing would take up an area of this 74 pixels plus the top margin and the bottom margin. So that's the total height that I would get. The height of the whole thing would be, it would be taking up a lot of space, right? So we had to really always think about what we add on. So there's a lot of math going on in this one. But box sizing makes things a bit simpler for us. If I write height, again, 50 pixels. So what's going to happen is if I add then padding on the top and on the bottom, what I actually get, if I have 10 pixels on the top and 10 pixels on the bottom, I'll still have a total height of 50 pixels. Because the padding is not going to add to the height. It's going to take away from the height. So the padding will take up the topmost 10 pixels and the bottommost part of this 50 pixels thing. So if I have 50 pixels on the whole height, it will take away. So there's only 30 left for the content. And then if you add border, it will take up more. It will take away more. But the height will not increase. It will stay 50 pixels. And then we add margin. And the margin works the same way as it does for both. So we want to keep that separate because that's a distance to other elements. It should not take away from our height. And it doesn't in this case either. So box size and border box actually does what it says. It says that the size of the box is dependent on everything inside of the border, up until the border. And the box size and content box says the size of the box is dependent on the content box. So the whole thing that goes in there is the content. And then we add the other things on top of it. So this really requires an example. And to do that, we actually have two neat elements set up for us. And let me just take this exact code we already have, and I place it there, just on the text and save. The only difference now being is that the topmost is red, the other one is blue. Now, we want to change how one of them is reacting. I know that if I write right now, I'm going to write it at the very bottom here so you can see box sizing, and I'm going to keep it at content box, and I'm going to keep it at content box at the other one. If I just do that and save, you will see no difference because that is the default value. It has already been entered into it. We don't have to write it, but it's the default value, so it's already been written into these elements. Now, if I take the red one and I change this to border box, we expect things to change. Now, before I save, I want us to think about what kind of change that would imply. I said earlier that the height, I took the height, but the same goes for width. The height defines everything. So it defines everything. It's both the padding is included inside of the height. The border is included inside of the height. And the width, so the padding and the border is also included inside of the width. So it means, kind of right now, if we do the math, I'm going to make a comment right just after this. We're saying we're having a padding of 20 pixels on each side. So 20 pixels above, left, bottom, and right. For the height, that would mean take 100 and then minus 20 first on the top, and then minus 20 again. Right, sorry. And then we have the borders, right? The border is 3 pixels. And then it's 3 pixels again on the bottom. So what we get here is that we minus all of this. We can instead, you can just minus, and we just make this happen. And we add these together, right? And we can make it really, really neat and just say like this, right? 20 times 2 will be the top and bottom. and we can say 3 times 2, top and bottom, and we add these two together because we want to take a minus of all of that. So what we get when we take 20 times 2, we get 40. 3 times 2, we get 6. So we have, we add them together, we got 46. So 100 minus 46 is equal to 54, right? So that is the amount left for our content to exist on, the content inside. Now, it's plenty enough for this to exist, but it's what's going to be happening here. In content box though, we'll get something else happening. And we already have that happening. We're saying the height is 100 pixels. And then we add this. You see? I think this would actually play out well, whether or not we had this, but I just wanted to separate them for them so you made it easy. So now we have 100 plus all of this, which makes for 146. Why does this matter? Now, whenever you make changes to this, it's going to take up more and less space. So you have to do a lot more math with this because this is done automatically and you just have to know the height and the width and everything just done for you. So you don't have to, if you're going to place things next to each other, you don't have to take account for the padding, the height, and the width, and all of that because you set it once and then it calculates it for by itself. But if you use content box, you have to think about, well, if I had 200 pixels, I also have to think of the padding, plus that, plus that, plus that, and it just takes a lot of time. So let us save now and see what goes on. Here you go. And just to prove my point, I can go here and inspect this. And right now I'm inspecting the first one, Alexander, and I'm gonna just do this to make sure you can see. I have this one noted and then I have this. So what this one says, it says I have 54 left in height. What did we calculate? 54, right? And even so, we said that we are going to have a height of 100 pixels. It says it reduced the height to 54 of the content because we needed to take away the 20, 20, 3, and 3 because we want the whole thing to be 100 pixels. So now decide that the whole element is 100 pixels. And then there's margin around, and that is kept at 35 because it's not part. It's not going to be reducing the size of this. So the margin is separate, and we want it that way. Now if we look at text down here, this one, we still have a height of 100 pixels, but then we add to it 20 and 20, 3, 3. So we are at 146. And plus the margin, which is still the same. I'm sure that you understand that if I always have to say width and then calculate the padding and then calculate the border to see that thing can stand next to each other, you'll see it would take a lot more time, a lot more effort to do so. That is why it's a standard to change all elements to work according to this one. Even though this has been the default from the very beginning, everyone nowadays changes to this one. That's why you'll see me do that in the future. So over to the next lecture. No, part of this lecture, sorry.